it's very nice to meet all of you. I watched Happy Endings Funeral Parlor and absolutely loved it. And so first off, thank you for making it. And I'm excited to talk to you about it.
Thanks for watching it. I'm glad that link works. Sorry, I'm a little technologically challenged sometimes, but I figured out how to get that to you. So I'm glad you're able to watch it.
Yeah, it worked like a charm. So
Perfect.
Awesome.
so first off, how did the three of you meet? And then how did this project kind of get started?
Yeah, I kind of the way we've kind of been explaining it is like dominoes in a weird way, which I think is all create really cool creative stuff. It always kind of happens that way, right? But if you look at the first domino, it's going to be Kyle. He originally wrote, well, I'll let you explain how you wrote it, Kyle, and then, but essentially
And
from
then lead
Kyle,
up.
yeah, it dominoed into me. We worked together many years ago, and then Kyle knew Trevor, family friends wise, so it ended up with him as well. So we ended up full circle there.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the oh, there's Leah. Um the journey, yeah, it began as a feature screenplay that I wrote in college and it was actually based on I had lost a childhood friend in my neighborhood growing up, and it was kind of this kind of it was an unexpected tragedy, and nobody could really fully cope with it and comprehend it. And it was the first time I had really experienced facing death. And I was a pallbearer at his funeral, so that all of that was a new experience, and it was pretty heavy stuff. And somehow this idea kind of just sprung out of it creatively as a kind of a coping thing, because I just feel like everybody just needed a laugh after dealing with the funeral service and all of that, and the whole neighborhood was just kind of really depressed and sad for weeks after. And so it was just kind of my way of saying, wow, we really need a laugh right now. And so that's where the idea began and formed into the screenplay and the story it is now. And then fast forward to years later, Zach and I are working together, and we had talked about several projects. He loved all of the scripts that I had, and we would shoot the breeze a lot about story. And this project actually came up during COVID. We weren't even working together anymore, and I thought of him for this project, and I reached out to him, and he loved it. And we just started going back and forth for like, man, this would be great to do as a self-contained scene. But then we realized that the opening of the feature would be really cool to expand. So the opening in the feature was 3 pages, and what we did was myself, Zach, and Anthony Theodorakos, our other co-writer, we sat down and we basically took the 3 pages of the opening in the feature and expanded it to 20. And we're like, what happens along the way to the funeral service? Like, let's just have everything go wrong, and let's just see where that goes. And that's kind of how the process went story wise once we started working together and getting into pre-production and everything. And then I'll let Zach pick up from there and add to that.
Yeah, and I think like kind of the point of it was sometimes with a lot of the festival pieces, you have such a short amount of time to kind of get your idea out there. But the point of this project for us was to get a feel for who the brothers are, what's the world they're in, what's the surrounding world, the family, etc., things like that. So, it's just kind of get the investors and people excited about what's to come with the feature. And so, in order to do that, we kind of called on all our friends and people like Trevor, who's obviously an incredible actor and, has been doing it for a long, long time and been in a lot of really successful things and all. He's also just so talented, as well as some of our other friends. We kind of had to call on to get those resources to be able to, have the performers to really, nail it, bring it home for us. And so ultimately, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the domino effect where how we all got involved. But I think it's all kind of to pitch it into the feature and to see that to tell people basically that the story we have coming is a lot more, it even has more elements and it's more fleshed out and it's more exciting and has a lot more heart to it as well.
Nice. So there are plans to make it a feature.
It's done. It's written. It's ready. Again, one of the beautiful things about producing this ourselves is a lot of people, they say, what's next? And it's like, well, for us, this movie's ready. We could shoot it in literally in a week if we had, just we were waiting on some other resources. But ultimately, we're excited to say that we have a product and we're ready to bring it to the big screen.
Very cool. Very cool.
Absolutely.
So then, Trevor, did they make you audition for this?
No, no, no audition, but I will say that the
Offer
process.
only.
I'm offer only. I'm offer only. No, they should have though. I mean, I love my part in the movie, and like Zach said, just to pick up on what he was talking about, like we're ready to go, and the way like the domino effect, I'd say I'm definitely like down the domino path a little bit more. Like I'd say Kyle, Zach, but once the domino hit me and I heard about it and I got to read the script, I mean, I fell in love with it, and I'm super proud to be a part of it. And I mean, you've seen it. I think it's super funny. When we took it to the Soho, we got a lot of laughs, and I just really there's so much more into it. Like Kyle was saying, like it's kind of like a base, but there's just so much more that we could do with it, and it's super exciting to be a part of. Definitely.
Um, what was your reaction to seeing what happens to your character and your character's family?
I just laughed. I just laughed because I could just picture it. I could picture what happens. You know, before when I first read it, I can just picture that, and it's just funny. It's just super funny. And then doing it and then being able to see it is a whole different thing.
And I should say that for on Kyle and I's perspective on that specific thing, we probably shouldn't say this. I probably shouldn't say this, Kyle, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Uh-oh.
Up until, and I'm not even kidding you, up until probably 2 weeks before this actually went down, we had no idea how the hell we were going to do that. We had ideas, right? Like we had at one point, like this stunt guy was like, yeah, it's $100,000 stunt. I'm like, we don't even have 100. What are you talking about? We don't like, what are you talking about? And so up until like literally pretty much on the ground, we decided, and that's kind of part of this process. We just called around and we were like, what can we do? And ultimately, in order to pull that off, not to give away too much, but we actually found a local dealer and they were real, that's what they did. Their specialty was glass, like windshields. And so they actually had crashed glass and removed it. But we literally had no idea. And we were just like, man, I hope this plays. Like, I hope it works. But it kind of goes to show that, if you like stick with it and you call enough people, like somebody's gonna have an answer, and hopefully it'll be like the right answer.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing is, like, I remember we were talking to our DP, director of photography, Darren, and we're like, so what do you think, man, optically? Like, how are we going to do this? And he was kind of like scratching his head, and we're all talking about it one day. And I was like, you know what? I've got it. We're going to get a crash dummy, and we're going to, shoot it on the side of the road. You're just going to throw it. Sorry, I'm giving away a little too much, but you're just going to throw it and see if it works. And it was to that point of like low budget filmmaking where we were ready to do that. And then thank God, like luckily we used a combination of things in the end run, and it worked. So we're very fortunate that it worked as well as it did, considering our limitations. And we had a wonderful veteran stunt guy involved. Super cool dude, Brian Denny. He's been around forever.
You don't really think about that. I guess you kind of do think about it, but on a studio level or even like a mid-budget level, right? Like all these things are, they have the money to do that, right? And so one of the things that's really scary, but also creatively really freeing is that we not having those options, we had to do everything our own way. And so like we were at a hardware store, a Lowe's in rural Iowa, and there was a science teacher, and we literally asked this guy, we were like, they're quoting us $20,000 to shoot a flame. Like, what do we do? And this guy was like, oh, you can get a butane lighter and you can just, shoot fire out of the top. And like, it's funny, but in a weird way, I think it also is kind of a little bit of a slap in the face to those studios, because it's to say that like these people are quoting, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do things that we literally were able to do for $50. So I would just say, to anybody out there who has a dream of doing this, if you talk to enough people, you're going to find a way. And maybe the people that you think really have it figured out, they're going to try to kind of extort you or figure out ways to like get money out of you. But if you do it yourself, you can have the same product and you can do it for literally $50. You know what I mean? You can have a flame effect or whatever you need. So just think outside of the box and have fun, and think like you're a kid and you're playing with Legos. And that's really what we kind of did. And nobody died. So
yeah, nobody died. Nobody got hurt.
Good.
Sometimes your limitations, and as we learned like Zach and I learned from the producing side. I mean, we were wearing triple hats, and running around like crazy. But from the producing side, sometimes those limitations are they really help you creatively, because you really got to think on your feet. You got to hit the ground running. Because we solved a lot. There were a lot of little problems that would come up, typical on set stuff that you had to resolve on the spot, or things weren't working, or how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Or this thing hasn't arrived on time that we need, and we have to shoot at this time. We had a very tight shooting schedule, and everything had to work, or you had to find a way to make it work. And I think the beauty of being on a small film or an indie film is really, it pushes you to think creatively and come up with solutions. And I think we accomplished that, and I'm really, really happy with the outcome.
Yeah, the final product, at least from my end, it was great. So kudos for all of the hard work that went into it. The film is set in Iowa and it was filmed in Iowa. Why Iowa?
Why?
It's a great question.
Yeah.
It's a great question.
I will remember. I'll never forget the first day I pitched it to Kyle, because he just looked at me and he was like, "They don't understand." And I was like, "No, trust me. Like, I'm from Minneapolis. I spent half my time living in Iowa with my grandma, so I was kind of back and forth all the time. There's a little town. It's called Iowa Falls, really small local community. But one of the things I realized, I mean, besides aesthetically seeing it as something that you never really see in films, I mean, honestly, I can't think of the last time that I saw Iowa, like rolling corn. I think Mindhunter did one episode where they're like driving through Iowa. And but I love that area. I think it's so open, it's vast, it's beautiful, it's really cool in its own way. It also plays into like Kansas City Mob and some other, really cool like local Midwest things that I thought would really resonate with people. But it's so funny because our colorist, who's honestly, again, another really cool person who just kind of helped us with a favor, but a very, very established colorist. He lives overseas, and he goes, "Dude," he goes, "I've never seen anything like this place. What is this place?" And I'm like, that's rural Iowa. So I think overseas, as we go overseas too, people are going to see that and go, I don't really know where that is or what that is. And so I think that really plays to the advantage again of, at most for budget reasons, and totally understandably, but most people just shoot in an office or in LA or on the side of a New York street because they have to. But I think it shows a different landscape that maybe we're not used to or accustomed to.
And it gave the short a flavor. It gave the short its own flavor, because the short, in some ways, the short is very, the short and the feature, obviously, there's a lot of connections. And then there's also some differences and some things that changed in the short, that worked really well and for the serving the short. And the scenically, Iowa gave it a very unique landscape, I think, to work with. And it just kind of opened our eyes to the story going in even more directions than we expected. So it was really cool the way it all worked
Yeah,
out.
and then like create part of the thing is, I think, originally Kyle and I were kind of like, oh man, like producing so analytical, all this thing. But you can find really creative ways of producing that I think we found really fulfilling. And so like the town that we shot in is called Clear Lake, Iowa. It's actually sadly the resting place of Buddy Holly, where his flight took off and it crashed, right? So it's pretty significant because the surf ballroom is where that happened, right? And so along the way, we were just like, whoa, how do we incorporate all these things, right? I mean, you've watched it, right? There's death, there's some things that happen, right? And so one of my favorite shots in the movie is actually Trevor. He's like looking out the window, and the town was cool enough to put tribute to Buddy Holly on the actual marquee of the place that he played his last show for us, right? And so it kind of foreshadows what's to come. And when you're watching it, you may not know that, but people in that area, it's very significant culturally to them. So like seeing that is a nice cue to what's to come. So we tried to bake a lot of those elements in, whether or not people notice them or not, but they're definitely there. I would say that if you look closely at, for example, the headstones, there's some fun significance in the headstones. There's a lot of little hidden little treasures if you look close in the movie.
We started having fun with Easter eggs. That was like, I guess because we were so delirious that we hadn't slept in weeks. And so we were just going kind of crazy with like, what kind of crazy thing can we bury in here or hide in the background of this scene, or what kind of, reference can we make? And we just started having fun with that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, now I need to know which one's your favorite that you hid.
Yeah, the Easter egg.
Yeah.
Oh man. Probably I mean the Buddy Holly thing I really think is I mean I'm glad Zach, I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's probably our best example of a visual metaphor or foreshadowing things that are going to happen. But it's so like people obviously it might hit different for people from Iowa, but people watching it that maybe don't know what happened, it's kind of this very subtle little cue of what's coming. And I think I like the way that that wound up playing out. And that wasn't that wasn't in the script at all. That's one of those things. I mean, we were on the ground when we discovered that we could maybe do that. So
Yeah,
that's one of
and
those
the
cool things
iterations
where
of
the
those
script
things
keeps.
never end, right? Like when we're there and we're thinking this stuff up, sometimes it's in pre-production, sometimes actually the if you look at the last shot of the film, right? And I probably won't say what that is there, right? But there's something that comes on the screen, right? And the iteration of that thing didn't exist until literally, 5 minutes before it got sent to the house to finish the picture lock. So things like that, there's little, it's like and even now there's like 50 things, 100 things we would change, probably all three of us looking at it and going, well, what could we have done different? But end of the day, a film, it lives in that space and, it's where it is. But yeah, if you look close, there's some little fun things along the
I'll have to watch it again and see if I can find it.
way.
Are you going to keep that trend of hiding Easter eggs through in the feature as well?
Yeah, I mean, ironically, well, the crazy thing is too, so like Anthony Theodorakis, our other co-writer, I've written several like 5, 6 screenplays with him, and everything we've written has we've gotten in the habit of like characters connecting with each other somehow. The whole universe thing has gotten really fun to just even movies that are completely different genres that we've written, there's little things or characters that tie together to each story, even though they're completely different worlds and not related directly in any sense other than maybe a character. So we've been having fun with that. It's it's just
And I think a
something
lot
that
of that comes too once you're shooting, right? I mean, like there's some of the things that we're talking about in there, like it was more like, this is what's so cool about film, right? Is that there's so many pieces and no person is in charge necessarily. We're all collectively making this, right? So like the art department would come over and they would say stuff like, well, what do you want as XYZ, right? And then we would think about it and be like, oh yeah, let's do, wait, no, this is a great opportunity to like infuse some of those elements. So I think, anybody has the opportunity to do that on the team to come up with those things. And I think each department did in their own way. And they made it their own and they put in their own, little twists and kind of little fun Easter eggs on it too. So I definitely think in the future
for
there
sure.
would be a lot more opportunity to do that because there's a lot more elements at play and a lot more time to do it too.
The feature is, I mean, if I had to give you like a quick elevator, like the tagline comparison type thing, I mean, it's kind of like a Goodfellas meets Pineapple Express and maybe throw Fargo in the blender. That kind of that's a
Okay.
wood chipper reference actually. But yeah, those three movies kind of blended together would kind of off the top of my head. It's very, there's similarities between the short and the feature. The feature obviously is bigger and it explores more. I think what people are really going to love in the feature is the chance to really get to know Johnny and Marcel more and see the father-son bond between them and Uncle Nicky because Uncle Nicky raised them, and that's something we really honed in on. That we didn't have the time to get into it in the short as much because we had so much going on in the short, but the feature really dives into they had lost their parents in a tragedy and Uncle Nicky raised them and gave them the jobs at the funeral parlor and now the business is kind of failing. So even though they're screw ups, they're not trying to screw up and they're trying to save the business and trying to do right by Uncle Nicky. So all of that I think the audience is going to love. The heart and soul is more fleshed out in the feature as well as of course a lot of crazy comedic moments. I think it's a good balance. Can't
Awesome.
give away too much, but
That's fair. That's fair. So the short is it still making its rounds on the festival circuit?
Yeah, it's very much still alive in terms of, our preliminary, the two festivals we went to were kind of our first jump. We wanted to hit the West Coast, obviously, because I mean, like Kyle has. Well, we've all lived there actually. Trevor, you grew up
Yeah,
there.
I was born there.
We've
Yeah.
all lived there. I live there currently, right? New York was a big thing for us. Those two cities are obviously important in terms of visibility. But what people can look forward to is it going overseas next, and that's kind of the next legs of that process. So end of 2024, but especially, I mean, we were reviewing this a lot, is coming in 2025. So that will be pretty meaningful, as well as we're waiting on, but very hopeful. We have Dubuque and Minneapolis, which are, again, this is a movie made there, and it's about that community. So we're hoping that that will be our middle America, and we've hit the whole US in that way, and then we can go overseas. But eventually our goal is obviously to really release it for everyone else to see as well. But I think that'll be further down the road.
Cool, cool. Are you gonna release the short to the public, or are you gonna wait until the feature's made? Or maybe both?
I think when the feature's up and running fully or finished, I think that's something we're toying around with, releasing the short to the public. With careful when you're making the festival rounds. Some of them will allow you to have it public, but most of them don't want it public. If you're going to screen there, they're very particular about that. So we've been really respectful about that, because I know a lot of them have they have a set thing of rules, and we certainly don't want to ruffle their feathers or mess up our chances of getting in. So yeah, for now it's just going to the festivals, and then it would be cool. I think that would be great to release it to the public.
Yeah, we want to make. I mean, I think we want to make it available for sure. It's not that we don't want to make it available to people, but to Kyle's point, it's they're very specific, even about where you premiere. You know what I mean? Like overseas where you premiere versus all these things. They have all these rules, so we're trying to respect their process, but we want
everyone to see it. We would love for everyone. So it's coming, and then I mean, for now, everyone can enjoy the trailer on IMDb. Or on our social medias. The trailer, we're very happy with how the trailer came out, and I hope people will get a great laugh even out of that.
For sure. Awesome. That was kind of like all the questions that I had. But before I let you go, is there anything else that you desperately want to add?
I'll just add one thing. Yeah, again, we live in this kind of tough time, I think, collectively in the industry. I think a lot of creatives are looking for work, hurting, and trying to figure out work. It really sharing, whether that be podcast or interview or advertisement or our trailer, it really does make a huge impact on us and for us. And it's really easy to click share, to your friends and things like that, but it really changes the outcome of, in our case, a year's worth of work and a lot of time and resources that went into it. So if you can find it in your heart, to share it even with one person, it makes a huge impact, and we'll be so thankful that you did that. So things like this, we really appreciate it, Beth, and we're thankful for you and anyone else who's listening and watching, just to keep sharing it. It means a lot.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, I'm glad I can help.
Thank you.
And I'll definitely be sharing it more, because it was hilarious, and you get glowing reviews from me. So.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's awesome. I mean, even when we screened in New York, and hearing people and hearing people laugh at things that Zach, I think we talked about this. It was crazy because LA people were laughing at different things. New York people were laughing at different things, some of the same things. But a lot of times it's things we weren't even expecting got the biggest laugh. And we were just looking at each other going, that got a bigger laugh? Because when you're on the writing side, you think, okay, these jokes are going to hit a little, we really punch these up, these moments are going to hit. And then sometimes things you'd least expect, people just go nuts, and they're just laughing like crazy. So it's a really cool and rewarding experience, especially in the theater space, to see what's making people just go nuts, what they're laughing at. It's really fun.